Hello friends, welcome to Awdhesh Academy. Friends, we have earlier learned about international morality, and we have learned that in the international morality, the international institutions play a very important role. And today we are going to learn about the United Nations, which is the most important international body for maintenance of the international order and to promote the international morality. So let's now know about United Nations. The United Nations is an intergovernmental organization which is tasked to promote the international cooperation and to create and maintain international order. And this was created after the Second World War, and it has played its role quite reasonably well, as we have seen that from more than 70 years we are having a peaceful time in the world, and some credit definitely has to go to United Nations. The United Nations is financed by assessed and voluntary contribution from its member states. And the UN is the largest, most familiar, most internationally represented and most powerful intergovernment organization in the world. So this is about the introduction of the UN, and let us now know about the objectives of UN. The objectives of the UN are as following. Maintaining international peace and security. This is the most important objective of the UN, and its job is basically to see that the war does not take place, there is a peace in the world, and the countries feel secure. To develop friendly relations among nations, promoting human rights. This is also one of the very important function of United Nations, that wherever there is violation of human rights, the UN interferes and ensures that human right violation does not take place. Upholding the international law. So whatever international laws are there, UN ensures that the countries who are signatory to that, they should follow that international law. Protecting the environment. Fostering social and economic development. So here also UN play a very important role. It provides humanitarian aid in the case of famines, natural disaster, and armed conflict. So in that case, it provides humanitarian assistance by help of the member nations. And it tries to achieve international cooperation in solving the international problem. So UN will take the support of all the member nations whenever there is an international crisis. It will try to solve the problem by taking the support of all. Now let's understand what are the principles of conduct by the United Nations. So United Nations is not a super policing organization. It's not like a super cop which is going to enforce the law on the individual nation. So there are certain code of conducts which we can call principle of conduct, which is prescribed by United Nations. Now these principles of conducts are as following. Sovereign equality of all members. So all the members of the United Nations are sovereign and they are equal. That means they can take their own decisions and they are treated as equal. Fulfilling international obligations according to the Charter. So the Charter has certain international obligations which are there to all the member nations, and every member nation is required to fulfill those international obligations. Next is settlement of international disputes by peaceful means. So whenever there is an international dispute, we should try to settle by peaceful means rather than resorting to power and war. Now it is also expected that the countries will not give threat to each other or not use force against the territorial integrity of another state. So in the earlier time, if you are having power, then you could have conquered any other nation. Today it is not allowed. So you cannot use the threat or force against the territorial integrity of another nation. Then whenever UN takes action against a particular country, then all the countries are required to assist UN in the action. At the same time, the countries must refrain from assisting any state against which UN has enforced action. So if UN is taking action against a particular country, then no country should help that country. So every country should support UN and not that country. But it should also be remembered that non-intervention by UN in internal affair of members. So UN also does not interfere in the internal affair of the particular country, and so every country must carry on their own affairs in their own manners. Only if there is a human right violation of the international treaty, or some sort of threats which a country is giving to another country, in that situation only UN comes into force. Otherwise, every country is expected to do their job and fulfill their internal obligation in their own manner. So friends, today we have learned in brief about the role of the UN and the principle of conduct and the responsibilities of UN. Thank you very much for watching this course. Today we are going to discuss about World Bank. Now this is a very important organization, and we know that World Bank plays a very important role in the development of the countries, and particularly for the countries like India. So let's know about the World Bank. Now the World Bank is basically an international financial institution that provides loan to the countries of the world for capital projects. So World Bank provide you soft loans, that basically means loans at the lower rate of interest, and it provides the loan for capital projects, that means basically for developing infrastructures. The World Bank was created in 1944, Bretton Woods Conference, along with the International Monetary Fund. And the World Bank and the IMF are basically, both are based in Washington DC, and they work closely with each other. And World Bank is responsible for the preparation of World Development Report. So this is in brief what World Bank is, and we have understood that IMF and World Bank created together, and they work in coordination with each other. Let us now know about the functions of World Bank. The intention why the World Bank was created was to provide temporary loans to the countries whose incomes are quite low and whose credibility is not so high in the international market that they can take the loan commercially from the companies or other organizations. So in these countries, the World Bank plays a very important role. World Bank sometimes also demands the policy reforms from the recipient. For example, in 1991, when India was undergoing a grave financial crisis, World Bank and IMF played a very important role in bailing out India, and they have provided loans to us. But at the same time, they have also demanded that India should liberalize its economic policy. So they can demand the countries, as a condition of the loan, that they should also carry out reforms in their country. Now friends, World Bank is basically not a bank as it appears from the name. It is rather a part of a World Bank group. So this is a very important thing for us to know. And this World Bank group is a family of 5 international organizations. And these organizations are International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, that is IBRD, International Development Association, IDA, International Finance Corporation, IFC, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, MIGA, and International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, that is ICSID. Now, out of the 5, the first 2, that is IBRD and IDA, are together known as World Bank, as they follow the same executive leadership and operate with the same staff. So when we talk exclusively of the World Bank, it is basically IBRD and IDA, and if we put all the 5 together, they become the World Bank group. Now we'll know about the functions of all the 5 agencies under the World Bank group. The first agency is called International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So as we can see from the name itself, that it is basically for the reconstruction and development, so it must be related with more like infrastructure project. So this IBRD was established in 1949, and it works with other institutions of the World Bank group and the public and private sector of a developing country to reduce poverty and share prosperity. So the rich countries have surplus wealth and the poor countries need that wealth, and so they share with each other the wealth so that the poverty can be reduced. The bank's member government are basically the shareholders who contribute paid in capital and have the right to vote on its matters. And IBRD acquires most of its capital by borrowing on international capital market through the bond issues. So it borrows from the international market by a bond, and thereafter it lends to the poor countries. After that, once it gets the money back, it repays back to the rich countries. The second important institution is called International Development Association, or IDA. This IDA was established in 1960 to complement the existing International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, that is IBRD. It basically lends to developing countries which suffer from the lowest gross national income, from troubled creditworthiness, or from the lowest per capita income. So it is like, the poorest of the poor. So among the developing countries also, those countries which are on the lowest regime, and basically because they don't have the creditworthiness, because their per capita income is also very low, this comes to their rescue. And India has been one of the largest beneficiary of the IDA support. Let's now go to the third important World Bank Group organization, which is called International Finance Corporation. This was established in 1956 as a private sector arm of the World Bank Group. So how does the IFC contribute into the economic development? What it does is that it does not give money to the government organization. It rather give money to the companies which are working for profit. So this is meant for profit and commercial projects, because if they prosper or they succeed in a particular country, then naturally it will reduce the poverty and it will promote the development. We are very well aware that India today, for example, is led by the private sectors. And if the private sector grows, then naturally it will create employment and the development of the country. So this IFC basically focuses on the for-profit and commercial projects. Now let's go to the fourth important agency, that is Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, or MIGA. Now when the companies, or let us say the developed countries, they give loans to the poor countries or the developing countries, there is always a danger that the economy may collapse and they may not get the money back. Or there is also a possibility of disability in the country's government, and that can also cause harm to their economy. As a result, this MIGA was set up, and it is an insurance agency. So MIGA was basically established in 1988 as an investment insurance facility to encourage confident investment in developing countries. So this gives confidence to the people who are investing in the developing countries that yes, their money will be back. If there is any problem, this MIGA will, compensate for that. It insures long-term debt and equity investment as well as other assets and contracts with long-term period. So when you are going to invest in the long-term period, MIGA will ensure that you will get your money back. It will provide you the insurance. It encourages basically the foreign investment in developing economies by offering insurance against losses caused by non-commercial risk. Non-commercial risk basically means those which are not related to business. For example, if there is an earthquake, or there is an act of God, or there is some sort of war, and because of that, if suppose that happens, it will compensate. But let us say the business itself does not prosper and business itself collapse because of the commercial consideration, then it will not come to the rescue. And finally, the fifth important organization is called International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. Now, sometimes there may be a dispute between the countries who have invested and the countries where the investment has gone. And so there has to be some mechanism to sort out the dispute, and ICSID is the forum for that. So this particular organization is an international arbitration institution which was established in 1966, and it is for legal dispute resolution and conciliation between the international investors. So if the investors which are internationally investing, if there is a dispute between them, it tries to settle that dispute. So one of the very important thing you should know is that India is not a member of ICSID. India is rather a member of Bilateral Investment Promotion and Protection Agreement, which is an agreement by which we promote the investment interest of each other on bilateral basis. That means that if suppose there is investment from one country to another country, then both countries will protect the interest of each other. So India is the member of BIPA. So friends, today we have learned about World Bank Group and we have known what are the roles which is played by the World Bank and World Bank Group in the development of international morality and international cooperation. Thank you very much for watching this lesson. Friends, today we will know about International Monetary Fund. And this is an international organization which has played a very, very important role for bailing out the countries and for the economic development of the countries, particularly which are the developing countries or poor countries. And so, let's know about IMF. The International Monetary Fund was established on 27 December 1945 in Washington on the recommendation of Bretton Woods Conference. So, as we have learned earlier, that IMF and World Bank both originated from the same conference, that was Bretton Woods Conference, and they were created together. It started working from 1st March 1947, and the main role of IMF is that it acts as a bailer to the member countries in a balance of payment crisis. So, if you do not have sufficient dollar reserve or international currency reserve that you can pay back the loans, or in order to import the things, you don't have sufficient foreign currency, then it helps you out. In 1991, when India was going through the crisis of balance of payment, IMF has played a very important role in bailing India out. International Monetary and Finance Committee, that is IMFC, is the key body which provides strategic direction to the work and the policies of the IMF. And IMF also releases the World Economic Report, which ranks over 200 countries in terms of per capita GDP based on purchase power parity. So these are some of the important roles of IMF, and let's try to find out what is the sources of fund for IMF. IMF funds basically come from two major sources, quotas and loans. So quotas are basically the pooled funds of member nations which generate most of the IMF funds. And in this, what happens, that the countries which have larger economies like America and UK and France and Canada and countries like that, they have larger quota and they contribute more to IMF fund. Now let us know the objective of IMF. IMF promotes the international monetary cooperation. It facilitates the expansion and balanced growth of international trade. It promotes exchange stability and prevent unnecessary exchange depreciation so that the exchange price is more stable. Remove all exchange controls and restrictions to establish multi-convertibility of all currencies, and it helps member countries with funds to collect maladjustment in their balance of payment. So these are basically the objective of IMF. Now let us know how it functions. So IMF has basically three types of functions: surveillance function, capacity building function, and lending function. So let us first talk about the function of surveillance. As we know, the meaning of the surveillance is to keep watch on the economies of the world. So when we are keeping surveillance on something, that means we are closely watching as to how that particular thing or that particular person is performing. Since IMF deals with economies and therefore IMF collects massive amount of data on national economies, international trade, the global economy in aggregate, as well as it provides economic forecast at the national and international level. And thereafter these forecasts are published in the World Economic Outlook. So this is a very important function of surveillance because it tells about the performance of the countries and what are their forecasts so that the other countries can decide whether they should invest in that particular country, do business with that country or not. So this is a very, very useful information which the IMF provides. The second important function of IMF is capacity building. That means to create capacity, to train the people so that they can run their economies well. So IMF provides technical assistance, training and policy advice to the member countries through its capacity building programs. These programs include training in data collection and analysis, which feeds into IMF's project of monitoring national and global economies. So the idea here is to understand that ultimately IMF will collect the data from the governments only. And so unless the governments itself has the proper mechanism to collect the data in their own countries, the IMF data will not be accurate. And so IMF does the capacity building so that you can collect the data yourself in your country and collect the accurate data, which can be then given to IMF so that its forecast will be reliable and trustworthy. And the third important function, and perhaps the most important function, is the function of lending. So IMF gives loans to countries that are experiencing economic distress in order to prevent or mitigate their financial crisis. So if the countries are going through the financial crisis like India has gone in 1991, then IMF provides them loans and it provides them lending. The members basically contribute the funds for this lending to a pool which is based on quota system, as we have already discussed, that it can take the loans from other side or it can get the money from the member states in the form of quota. And so lending is one of the very important functions of IMF. So friends, today we have learned about the International Monetary Fund or IMF, and this is a very, very important international organization which contributes to the international morality and international cooperation. Thank you very much. Friends, today we are going to learn about World Trade Organization, that is WTO. And this is an organization which is responsible for freeing the trade between different countries. And this has played a very important role in developing commercial interest between different countries. And this is a very, very important thing for us because when two countries have commercial interest with each other, then generally they will not try to damage each other. They will rather like to help each other so that will promote both the countries' interest. So WTO over a period of time has played a very important role in developing international relations and international morality. So let's learn about the World Trade Organization. Now, World Trade Organization is basically an intergovernmental organization that is concerned with the regulation of international trade between nations. So the main role, as we can understand, is international trade between different nations. Earlier it was known as GATT, or General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, that is GATT, and that started functioning after the Second World War, that is in 1948. Then in the year 1995, 1st January, the WTO started officially functioning under the Marrakesh Agreement, which was signed by 124 nations on 15th April 1994. So the formal organization of the present WTO started in 1995, but before that also it was working with a different name, that was GATT. WTO is the largest international economic organization in the world, and it is the global international organization which deals with the rules of trade between the nations. So what is the main function of WTO is that it forms the rule which are applicable between different nations. Imagine that if WTO is not there, then each country has to undergo a different type of agreement with each nation for conducting the business. But now when the WTO forms the rule, that becomes binding on all the WTO nations. The goal of WTO is basically to help producers of goods and services, exporter and importer conduct their business. So how does WTO do this? Because it promotes your market. If you are selling your goods only in the domestic market, your demand is less. But if you can sell that in the entire world, your demand goes up. And that is how it helps the producers, it helps the exporter and importer in conducting their business. Now let us know about the WTO agreement. Now these WTO agreements are basically negotiated and signed by the bulk of the world's trading nations and ratified in their parliaments. So first of all, the representative of the countries sign this agreement, and thereafter it has to be ratified by the local parliament so that it becomes binding on that country. And these agreements basically make provisions for removing the trade and non-trade barriers, protection of domestic industries, protection of farmers, protection of IPR, etc. So what happens that every country want to protect their domestic industries and their domestic farmers, and that is something which actually hinders the international trading. So we put some sort of restriction there, and we try to see that you remove those barriers one by one so that the international goods can flow in, consumer can get the goods at the cheaper cost, and the domestic industries are also have to become more competitive to compete in the international market. Now let us understand the basic principles of WTO. The first important principle of WTO is that it promotes trade without discrimination. In this WTO agreement, the first important concept you should know is the concept of most favored nation, or MFN. Under the WTO agreements, countries cannot normally discriminate between the trading partners or grant someone a special favor like the lower customs duty for one of their products. Now let's understand the basic concepts of most favored nation. When you give the status of most favored nations to the countries, then you will find that they all must have the same rate of customs duty applicable. So for example, if we are importing the goods, then I cannot put a higher tariff on the Chinese goods as compared to the tariff which I imposed on American goods or British goods. All the most favored nations must suffer the same rate of customs tariff. So that is a very, very important thing. And even otherwise, we cannot differentiate the goods coming from the most favored nation. But even if we have given the most favored nation status, we can have a bilateral agreement and then we can reduce the tariff of each other. But we cannot discriminate any other most favored nation. So whatever is my general tariff, that will be applicable to all the countries which has got most favored nation status. The second important concept is fair national treatment. What is the concept here? That the imported and locally produced goods should be treated equally, at least after the foreign goods have entered the market. And the same should apply to foreign and domestic services and to foreign and local trademark, copyrights and patents. So the meaning here is that you cannot provide some sort of extra benefit in terms of business to the goods which are produced locally and differentiate them against the imported goods. So once the imported goods have landed into India, they must follow the same rules and laws which the local goods follow or local services follow. You cannot put any extra conditions or terms to the imported goods or services. So this is something which is very important, that once the goods or services have come inside the Indian market or your local market, they all must be treated equally. So the second important concept is the freer trade. What does it mean? It means that lowering the trade barriers, including customs duties or tariff. That means we should reduce the customs duties and tariff so that the goods can freely enter our market. If the customs rate is very high, then the imported goods has to have that much of disadvantage because they have to pay that much of customs duty which the local industries don't have to pay. And so when you reduce it, you give a level playing field to the imported items. The second thing is that sometimes the countries ban certain imports or put some sort of quota so that the imported quality or the quantity is restricted. Now that is also something which is prohibited. So we should not have any sort of quota or any sort of import ban. We should try to reduce that. The next important thing about the freer trade is improve predictability through binding and transparency, which encourages investment. Now we should have some sort of predictability that the rates are not going to change on the random basis, so that business can have a long-term proposals so that the investment can flow. Now, what is the advantage of freer trade? When we go for a free trade or freer trade, in that situation what happens? That jobs are created. Because more import and export takes place, more jobs are created. Best thing is that the consumer get the maximum benefit because they get the goods which is of the best quality at the cheapest price. And it encourages the competition, and consumers get more choices and they have to pay lower prices. So these are some of the benefits which the country or the countries who open up their trade, they get. Now let's know about the third important aspect of WTO. It promotes fair competition. Now most of the people think that WTO want that there should be free trade. That means just like you trade within the country, you can trade internationally. That is not really an accurate description of the WTO policy. Because WTO allows you to have some tariff, and in the limited circumstances, you can also have some sort of protection. For example, for agriculture good, you can have some sort of protection. Or even for some domestic industries, you can put some sort of protective measures. So little bit of protection is permitted. The main important thing is that the WTO want that all the protections must be very transparent. You must tell as to how much is the protection, why you are stopping goods from some particular country, or why you want to put some sort of quota. So what it wants is that you should have a system of rules which are dedicated to open, fair and undistorted competition. So that it should not happen that some countries get the benefit, some businessmen get the benefit. People should know that yes, this is the tariff, this is the barrier, and so that the free trade can be promoted. The fourth important objective is to encourage development and economic reforms. Friends, before 1991, when India opened the economy, our tariff rates used to be very, very high. The peak customs duty will be even more than 200%. And as a result, the international trade was very, very minimal. And that has led to the lack of development. In India, our growth rate was very low. But post-liberalization, we have seen the export and import activities to pick up, and this has led to the development of our country thanks to the economic reforms. And there WTO contributes. So WTO systems basically contribute to the development of the participating countries. But WTO does not say that you open the border for us or the other countries immediately. It rather provides the developing countries time, because developing countries need flexibility in time to implement the agreement. So like in our country, the tariff barriers was not reduced suddenly. Today the customs duties are generally in the range of 10%. Earlier it could be as high as 200%. So this has been reduced over a long period of time in a very gradual manner. So that way the agreement allows you to reduce the duties in a gradual manner and not in a sudden manner. And the agreement also allows you to have an special assistance and trade concessions, which is basically applicable for the developing countries. Because if you go to the developed countries, they generally don't have the barriers. That means their customs duty will generally be low. But in the developing countries like India, it allows that, okay, you can have some sort of customs barrier so that you protect your domestic industries to some extent. So all these things are basically allowed. And overall, we have seen that if we are following the guidelines of WTO, it leads to the development and prosperity of the nation. So friends, today we have learned about WTO. I hope that you got the concept of WTO, and this has played a very important role in development of the international cooperation and international morality. Thank you very much. Friends, today we are going to learn about World Health Organization. This is a very, very important organization, and we are aware that in the time of coronavirus or COVID-19, this organization has been under controversy also. So what is the role of WHO? And whether it has been able to fulfill those roles, we should know about it. So today we are going to learn about WHO as an international organization, a very important wing of United Nations. So let's know about WHO. The World Health Organization, or WHO, is basically a specialized agency of United Nations that is concerned with international public health. Because health is a matter where unless we take care of the health of the entire population of the world, it can create a problem. We have seen that this COVID-19 started from China, and today it has become a greatest menace for the entire world. And therefore, if we want the world to be free of illness and to have health, we have to take care of the health of the entire world. This organization was established on 7th of April 1948, and its headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. WHO is a member of United Nations Development Group. Now, before WHO, there was another organization which was called Health Organization, and that was an organization which was the agency of the League of Nations. Now, the WHO is responsible for the World Health Report, the worldwide World Health Survey, and also to celebrate the World Health Day. So what is the objective of the WHO? According to the WHO's constitution, the objective of the WHO is the attainment by all people of the highest possible level of health. That means all people in the world must achieve the highest level of health, and that is basically the objective of the WHO. Now let's understand how the WHO achieve its objective. So the following steps are taken by WHO to achieve the objectives. First, it provides leadership on matters which are very critical to health. So as we have seen that it is providing all the information in relating to COVID-19 and this coronavirus all over the world, and it's giving the information which is very useful to all the populations of the world. Then it is playing an important role in shaping the research agenda, setting norms and standards, and promoting and monitoring their implementation. Thereafter, it also articulates the ethical and the evidence-based policy options. Another objective is to provide technical support and catalyze change and build sustainable institutional capability. Thereafter, it monitors the health situation and assess the health trends. And another very important objective of WHO is CRVS, that is Civil Registration and Vital Statistics, and this is done to provide monitoring of the vital events, for example, birth, death, wedding, divorce, etc. So these are the objectives of the WHO by which they want to provide health to all the citizens of the world. Now let's understand what are the functions of WHO. It acts as the directing and the coordinating authority on international health work. So all the international bodies basically coordinate their work through WHO. It establishes and maintains the effective collaboration with the United Nations. As we know that WHO is part of that United Nations group, and therefore it basically establishes and maintains a very effective coordination with United Nations. It assists governments in strengthening health services. It furnishes appropriate technical assistance whenever it is required by any of the member countries. It also provides health services and facilities to special groups. So if there is a special group which demands some sort of special facilities and health services, that is also done by WHO. So it establishes and maintains administrative and technical services relating to health. And it stimulates and advances work which is to eradicate epidemics, endemics, and other disease, for example, this coronavirus. It also promote and prevent the accidental injuries. In that direction also, it provides its assistance. It also promotes the improvement of nutrition, housing, sanitation, recreation, economic and working conditions, and other aspects of environmental hygiene. Because these are the things which are very much required to have this sustainable health to all the citizens. So there also it try to promote and it try to improve the conditions of the people of the world. It also promotes cooperation among scientific and professional groups which contribute to the advancement of health. So if some scientific advancement has been done in one country and that can be useful to another country, it try to coordinate research, it try to coordinate work, utility among the different countries. It also proposes conventions, agreements, and regulations and make recommendations with respect to the international health matters. So friends, these are the different functions of WHO, and WHO plays a very important role in promoting good health to all the people in our world. Thank you very much for watching this lesson. Friends, today we are going to learn about International Court of Justice, or ICJ. This is a very important organization, and we know that sometimes different countries approach ICJ for resolution of the disputes between them. And we will learn about ICJ today. So this International Court of Justice, which is also known as the World Court, is the court which try to settle the disputes between different nations. And this is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. So it is connected with United Nations in this way, that this is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. The primary functions of the ICJ is to settle the international legal disputes which are submitted by the states, which we also call contentious cases, and give advisory opinion on the legal issues referred to it by UN, and which are called advisory proceedings. So if there are contentious issues between two nations, then they can go to the ICJ and it can settle the disputes between them, and also it can give you advisory opinion if the United Nations asks for it. So ICJ, whatever opinion it gives, whatever ruling it gives, that become basically source of international law. Just like the ruling of Supreme Court become a source of law as far as our country is concerned, ICJ's rulings and opinions become the source of international law. And ICJ, as we know, was recently in news when the trial of Kulbhushan Yadav was taking place. So that is the reason that ICJ was in news. And it's generally in news for multiple reasons, because countries keep on approaching them for settling their disputes. Now let's understand the composition of International Court of Justice. ICJ basically comprises of a panel of 15 judges which are elected by the General Assembly and the Security Council for a 9-year term. And this court is basically seated in Peace Palace in Hague, Netherlands. So that is the location of this court, which is there in Netherlands. Now, once the International Court of Justice gives its opinion or ruling, how it is implemented. So let's know about the implementation of the orders of the ICJ. Chapter 14 of the United Nations Charter authorizes the UN Security Council to enforce the court ruling. However, the enforcement of the rulings of the ICJ is subjected to the veto powers, which is there with the 5 permanent members of the council. So even if the ICJ gives its ruling, if one of the 5 members apply their veto power, then the ruling cannot be implemented. Now, in addition to passing the judgment and giving its ruling, it also provides advisory opinion to the United Nations. So United Nations Charter grants the General Assembly or the Security Council a power to request the ICJ court to issue an advisory opinion on any legal question. Just like in India, the President can request the Supreme Court to give its opinion on any legal matter. Now, as we know that the opinion of the Supreme Court is not binding on the President, but at the same time, the government gives due credit to it once they have taken the opinion of the Supreme Court. In the same way, the court's advisory opinions are basically consultative in nature as far as the International Court of Justice is concerned. However, they are very influential and widely respected because it is an international court. So unless you have a very strong reason to reject that opinion, you generally follow that opinion. And therefore, UN, if it has asked for the opinion of ICJ, generally it will follow the opinion which has been given by the ICJ. The most important thing is that the legal reasoning which is embodied in the rulings of the ICJ reflects the court's authoritative view on important issues of international law. That means whatever the reasons has been given to decide a case in a particular manner, that become basically something like an international norm, and that can be used by the different courts all over the world. So that has a very, very important persuasive power as far as the ICJ's rulings are concerned, because they have all the word as a jurisdiction. So friends, these are the information about the ICJ, and ICJ plays a very, very important role in settling the disputes